We talk about ZenCash a lot, and recently ZenCash experienced a 51% attack on their network. What does that mean? How does that affect your holdings, and what's going to happen with the future of Zen? In today's show, we have Rob Viglione, and we're going to talk about the 51% attack, what they're doing to mitigate these sort of instances from ever happening again, and the future and where Zen is planning to go moving forward. Let's discuss. Hey everybody, so I am here with Rob Viglione, the co-founder of ZenCash, president of the Zen Blockchain Foundation, also PhD candidate, former physicist, and mercenary mathematician, self-described libertarian, Rob Viglione. Rob, thank you for being on the show. How's it going today?
Thank you for having me, Gary. It's good to be back. All going well.
Good to hear. Thanks for making time for this interview. I know you're very, very busy with everything that's going on with the ZenCash, and also very busy with all of the news and the excitement that the market's been having around this, whole 51% attack, which I think everyone is pretty well aware of at this point.
Mm-hmm. These are very interesting times, and beware of living in interesting times, right?
Absolutely, indeed. A lot of people are getting into crypto all the time. Every day, there's more and more people who are getting involved in Bitcoin and Ethereum and the subsequent other blockchain projects out there, such as ZenCash. ZenCash is a project that I'm super excited about just because of the commitment that it seems the project has, everyone in the project, to create a really robust, secure, not just digital cash, but also digital messaging system. We know ZenCash, currently the secure and private messaging platform. ZenCash currently has ZenCash for money. It currently has ZenChat for chat and communications. And then there's really interesting additional add-ons coming down the market in terms of the Zen messaging, right?
Correct, yeah. So we basically have, we released a white paper about a month ago that describes our pivot into a platform system, kind of migrating from just a cryptocurrency. And we have a unique take on that and how we're going to do kind of side chaining, smart contracting, and the whole gambit to really explode the project.
When you say explore the project, to go more into ZenPub for media, and then ZenHide to really obfuscate the Zen blockchain traffic, so it looks like normal encrypted internet communications, right?
Yeah, and to go way beyond that, actually, those were just really our initial set of privacy-oriented applications to really kind of lay the groundwork for the project. But this whole pivot into a platform goes way beyond that. So we're targeting a smart contracting system running on side chains that really you can do the full gambit of business functions and enterprise activities on top of. So really the big goal in the longer term is to have a vibrant app ecosystem, and the real value prop being empowering individuals to own their own data from this kind of broad app ecosystem. So just those apps that were kind of in the white paper were really just the initial set, so that we can get this infrastructure started to be censorship resistant, so that everyone around the world can have equal access to it. But now we're starting to think, well, what are we going to do with it? And just giving someone, a domain fronting access into your ecosystem isn't, in my opinion, a sufficient long-term value proposition. It's really a tool to eventually find something that has more economic value.
Right. So with all of these different applications and possibilities that I guess are coming down the pipeline for Zen, and with the smart contract system, do you see Zen as competing with Ethereum or Ethereum Classic, with Cardano and EOS?
Sure, but probably in its own niche within these domains. So there's already ecosystems evolving around these other platforms, and for some people, maybe our ecosystem will make more sense. Ours is being built with security as the kind of like the main primitive for the system, which is why we're taking a little bit longer of a rollout into the platform. So for projects and businesses and apps that require, say, snarks, or kind of deep privacy or security for consumer data, I think what we're building would make a lot of sense. For CryptoKitties and other things that work perfectly fine on other platforms, it's that's your choice to build on us. It's not necessary. Although we are trying to build an extremely massively scalable and very high transaction throughput system. So it'll be interesting once we actually build it out. And even from the perspective of what languages are we going to build into it, we're going well beyond Solidity. So for other application developers that want things like Golang, for instance, it might be a very nice alternative.
Interesting. And so as you guys move in that direction, which I suppose blockchains or digital assets do you see an interoperability possibility with Zen, if any at all?
So, I mean, ultimately, we want to push hard for interoperability. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel for everything. So in terms of individual ones, I would be hard pressed to
like
give you a particular one.
Like ADA, for example. Is there anything going on there?
Yeah, so we don't have anything in works right away. But what I can say is, so our sidechain solution, we're building it with the IOHK team that we've been working with. They're scientists. So our first sidechain will actually be written in Scorex. Which is an IOHK, blockchain protocol or blockchain framework that they've already put out. So, in terms of interoperability, it should be very easy to be interoperable with Cardano for sure. But then, of course, we want to go beyond that. We want interoperability with what we think are kind of the key dimensions in this ecosystem. So, I mean, for instance, I would love for us to work much more closely with ZCash and to be interoperable and provide products that community can enjoy as well. And of course, Ethereum Classic and these other communities that want to pivot towards some of the products that we're going to be building out, we would love to be interoperable with. Ultimately, we want to create kind of standards and APIs on protocols that people can just plug into rather than having to reinvent the wheel.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. It was a little bit of a side tangent.
Yeah.
but it's definitely interesting because we're living in this world where there are many different projects, blockchain projects, independent projects, and not just any project, but projects that have really strong teams. And so moving forward, some of these projects are probably going to excel. And I think the general consensus is that the vast majority of these projects are going to fall by the wayside, or at least not keep up, with the end of the curve, if you will. And so I think a lot of people are interested in which projects are creating the greatest amount of value, which projects have the greatest focus of their mission and vision, and which projects are going to be able to intertwine with each other to really lay the groundwork for this future, this decentralized token-based future moving forward, right? Especially as we may be on the cusp of monumental change.
Yep. So I completely agree with you. So the way that I look at this is the most dynamic competitive industry in the world. So, of the 1,600 or so projects that you see, of course, probably most of them will go away, but that doesn't mean that we won't have 1,600 or more projects in the future. It just means that they'll be replaced by other projects that are maybe more innovative, maybe more resilient, maybe have some value proposition in some dimension that the market wants. And I think that one thing that you hit on is it's the teams building these things that I think are becoming increasingly important and professionalized. So if you look at our team, we've got over 50 people right now working on our team, half of them full-time, half of them part-time. We have 3 software companies that we work with. In addition to that, in addition to augment just our internal engineering team, we work with external PR marketing firms as well, augmenting our internal teams. So you can see this depth of talent that we have kind of in-house and outsourced is I think itself a huge competitive advantage in an industry that up until basically last year has been kind of enthusiasts or kind of like an open source community that comes together and people voluntarily contribute commits or whatnot, or voluntarily contribute some PR or BD activity. Whereas now these things, if you're not professionalizing and layering in deep talent in-house and working with good partners, you're just going to fall behind.
So let's sort of pivot from this conversation, which is fun and technical, and I love it, and talk about this new website that has really gained a lot of people's attention, and that's crypto51.app, of which we don't want to be featured on all the lists in the world, and this is a list that ZenCash is on, and if I'm reading it right, I have it pulled up on the screen right here. It says that ZenCash is nice hashable. At 128% capacity, and that ZenCash, as we know, did just recently experience this 51% attack. And so, and from the response that I've seen, and from all the information that I've seen, the ZenCash team became aware of this incident relatively early, and then you guys had a response effort for this relatively early. It all happened just in the matter of hours, if I'm not mistaken. And when this happened, it's our understanding that no new Zen was created. ZenCash, it wasn't hacked. No one's information was lost. There was again, no new money created, but there was a specific victim who was out about 23,000 Zen, which, depending on the numbers, what is that? $600,000, $700,000, give or take. And I think a lot of people are confused. What does this mean? Not just beyond that, but what does this attack mean for the future, and how do we really know this isn't going to happen again?
Right. So we have to make some things clear. Is we're not the only coin vulnerable to this. Basically, any coin that uses Bitcoin consensus protocol, like Satoshi's longest chain rule, is vulnerable. Now, you're vulnerable essentially inversely proportional to the amount of hash rate that you have. So Bitcoin itself, it would take a very large and expensive attack. Although if you look at that website, it's not that bad. It was something, like $500,000 to hijack the network for an hour. So it's still not prohibitive. It's something. Now, we have to make also an important point here is for an attacker, you're rolling the dice. It's not like you invest $500,000 and you win guaranteed. You invest $500,000 to roll the dice at a chance to win, a sequence of blocks that then you could, defraud someone with. So even in our case, it was way too low of a number. So we, and this just shows you how vulnerable these projects are, or how vulnerable they have been. And to be quite frank, I think the industry is taking the threat too lightly. Now, that said, we have to also put this into perspective and realize that, so number one, no new coins were created, like you said. This was unfortunately a misunderstanding going around the community, which I think scared a lot of people, where they thought our coin supply was compromised. Not the case at all. So what happens with these types of attacks is the attacker will deposit some funds into an exchange and then parallel mine privately a sequence of blocks, trade the funds that they put into the exchange, withdraw some other coin, and then go ahead and inject some sequence of fraudulent blocks into the chain that has more proof of work that invalidates their original deposit into the exchange. So the second big point here is no one's private keys are at all compromised in a 51% attack. There's no way you can 51% attack away someone's private keys. So all of your funds that you keep off exchange are completely safe. There's no compromise here. So this is essentially what happened, where someone was able to mine 38 sequential blocks that invalidated a deposit into one of our exchange partners, and they essentially robbed the exchange of 23,000 Zen, which was very unfortunate. Now, our team's response, I think, would be like a textbook example of how to respond to these things. We knew that this threat was mounting over the last few weeks, so we set up a team that had a tripwire process. The tripwire was crossed. We identified that we were under attack. We spun up the team at like 1 in the morning to deal with this. The team worked throughout the night. We had analysts monitoring the events. We coordinated all of the responses with all of our exchange partners real time. And we had our PR marketing team documenting the events explicitly and then drafting immediate communications with the community that were released that very next morning. So all the damages were contained, and we were in constant communication with the community. So I think it went well as well as these things can go. But what it did was, I like to say that our project is anti-fragile in the sense that this attack spurred a whole bunch of engineering activity for the project, where our team just deep dived right away and said, these attacks are not magic. They're not rocket science to fix. We know exactly how we're attacked. So we're going to change the consensus rules to make sure that this is virtually impossible or just economically infeasible in the future. So that's exactly what we're doing. We have a response that we're going to, like a technical solution that we're going to publish targeting this Wednesday, our solution for making this kind of modifying Satoshi consensus so that this can't happen again.
The solution that you guys have in place, is that something that any other blockchain projects are already have implemented?
No, no one's implemented it yet. So it's innovative in the sense that over the last 10 years of Bitcoin, no one's done this. It's just a really intuitive and simple modification to consensus that essentially penalizes someone for mining privately and not reporting blocks that they mine real time. So that's the problem, is that someone can mine a sequence of blocks privately. Say you mine 100 blocks privately, and then you inject them all at once and invalidate the former sequence of 100 blocks. That process should not be allowed. That process exists because Satoshi solved a really a compelling problem at the time, which was how you do distributed consensus so that you can have coordinated activity for any node around the world. But the reality is, you could have legitimately 1 or 2, 3 or 4 maximum blocks solved in parallel legitimately. And when you get beyond that number, this is no longer legitimate, parallel mining or legitimate, simultaneous finding of blocks. This is someone trying to commit fraud. So we know that. So we know that if you have, greater than n number of blocks that you're trying to sequentially inject into the chain at a delay, this is fraud. Any legitimate miner will mine a block and report it to the chain. So if you have more than n number of blocks being reported all at once, this is what we need to solve or prevent. This is exactly what our consensus modifications do.
And what equals n?
The number of blocks mined, kind of in private.
So that should never be greater than 1.
Exactly. It really should never be greater than 1, maybe 2. Realistically. So if you allow up to like 4 or 10, there's no real world use case where you need more than 10 minutes to report a block that you've mined to the world. So typically a legitimate miner will mine a block and immediately report it, and it takes 1 or 2 seconds to reach every node around the world, or at least the majority of nodes. So there's no reason that any legitimate miner will have to mine 30 or 40 blocks in private and then report them all at once. So you want to penalize that process is what you want to do.
Yeah, but penalize the fraudulent looking behavior.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting. Do you think that once these new systems are fully in place, would you venture to say that it would be impossible for someone to conduct a 51% attack again between this new sort of update to the protocol and with 100 or 200 transaction validations required? Would you say it would be impossible for this to happen again to Zen?
So never impossible. We have to be realistic here, and we actually just ran some simulations that our chief engineer ran me through before this call. And we have some beautiful looking tables that I'm encouraging him to publish, but he still wants to go back and make sure that everything is correct. So don't quote me on these numbers, but the simulations show that we can take the cost of this type of attack from say under $10,000 to over $1 million with this technique. And there's also a scaling, kind of a functional form for like a scaling multiplier that we're considering adding to the penalty metric that can make this kind of the cost explode. So as it is right now, as written in the paper that we're going to release, with a scaling factor of 1, which means no scaling, we're looking at probably about $1 million to launch this kind of attack, which is twice the cost of launching them Bitcoin. So from a feasibility perspective, why would you roll the dice for $1 million to attack Zen when you could do that with Bitcoin? And there's so much more economic value to pillage there, right? But we could modify this to make that $1 million cost, exponentially higher, which we'll probably do by just adding some functional form to the penalty metric. But which the functional form, you want to basically have no multiplier or very, very small multiplier for like the first handful of blocks. But then once you hit, the 4 to 10 or 10 plus block range, we know that this is fraud. So you want it to scale exponentially at that point, right? So this is the type of function that we're investigating whether or not we want to append to this current penalty metric. But the way it is right now would be not impossible, but you would be rolling the dice $1 million a pop for the chance of 51% attacking us, which is insane. So it's economically
only
viable.
On the current, only at $20 or $30 a token.
Yeah, exactly. It's insane. Like who would do this, right? And then the second thing is, so I'm a big believer in defense in depth. So what I want to do is we'll release this first modification to consensus, which makes it economically infeasible. Right? You would be insane to do this. But then I want to layer in a.
You need a hard fork to do this?
Well, actually, for this one, you need a soft fork.
Okay.
But you want to enforce all of the major nodes on your network, including exchanges and mining pools or whatnot, to use it. And the best way to encourage this is to force them to do it through a hard fork. But what we'll probably do is we'll probably release the code so that all of our key stakeholders can upgrade immediately. And then in a future hard fork, we'll just enforce it for the entire network. But we already have a hard fork scheduled for release around the 3rd week of July. But this is, what I don't want to do is push a consensus modification that we haven't had time to adequately test. So I'm actually not a fan of including this in our July hard fork. I'd rather do the hard fork with the code that we've already tested like crazy, and then include this in like a soft fork modification that key stakeholders are encouraged to upgrade.
I see. Well, that's definitely very, very encouraging. It sounds like you have some encouraging, data already coming in from your chief data scientist and what you guys are looking at in terms of, making it 100x or maybe 1,000x more difficult than it would otherwise, had been than it was. And I think that just helps people very clearly understand what this one attack vector is about, with this one concept of the 51% attack where a malicious miner is committing fraud to give a victim bad information in order for them to trick them into giving them money that they don't really have, or that they end up double spending. But then there's other issues as well. And then until we have an incident, those issues don't become top of mind to the majority of users until those happen. I guess one of the questions I have for you and for Zen, and Zen becoming more robust and more anti-fragile, is that at what point where will I guess it seems as if there's centralized decision making at Zen, and I think there was someone on Twitter that was recently quoted, who said something along the lines of, if your blockchain project has scheduled hard forks, that it's not really decentralized. And so, what would you say to that statement?
Well, that statement's not correct. So I do, readily admit that we're not nearly as decentralized as we want to be. And for us, but even when we released our initial white paper and launched last May, we have a path to decentralization. We never claimed, hey, we're fully decentralized now. So we're actually creating a DAO. And that DAO, like, we're only solving one decentralization problem of how you allocate resources with this DAO implementation. And that's not going live until Q4. And then we need to figure out how you do software upgrades. But the statement that if you have scheduled hard forks, it's not decentralized, that's not true, because the decision to schedule the hard fork could be decentralized. And therefore, of course, it's a decentralized decision. So that I would disagree with. But now, how do we go from, our team making this decision for the entire community? What we're doing here with even this 51% attack mitigation is we're going to post this to our GitHub as an improvement protocol and then get community feedback on it. Now, that's still not completely decentralized. All that is we're open to community feedback, and the community can comment, community can review in the open source fashion, make modifications to the proposal. But really what we need to do is we need to have a voting system built into the protocol that these decisions are ultimately determined by the community directly. We don't have that yet. That's just the reality of it. And that's what we're marching towards.
With IOHK.
Yeah, so what they're doing is they've already delivered a prototype of the voting system.
Oh.
Now, so we already have the prototype in-house. This is, I think, a fact very underappreciated in the industry, is we have the industry's best voting system already in prototype that now we're handing off to another engineering team with another one of our software development partners named InfoPulse. They're like Ukraine's version of IBM. They have a very professional engineering team. We have a whole team from InfoPulse that we're going to be highlighting these guys in this Wednesday's bi-weekly, but I'm very happy to say we love these guys and they're super professional, and now they're taking the IOHK code that our engineers have worked with IOHK to make sure that this works for us, and now our engineers are going to be working with the InfoPulse engineers to actually do the implementation into our code base. But the important point here is that this voting system is to determine how the treasury resources are allocated, which is important as well because this is the first step towards decentralization. But then the next important step when we go beyond this is how do we build into the system a voting system so that we determine when and how we do hard fork upgrades. Because you have to, if you can't come to consensus on how to upgrade your code base, you're a dead project. You're going to be stagnant and you're not going to be able to react to just the real world environment. So we have to have a dynamic way to be flexible and react as a community, but decentralize that. And that's where we're trying to go.
Well, that's very, very exciting. And you see that coming in 2019 or by Q4 2018?
So Q4 2018 is when we hope to have the production level voting system built into our protocol, but for the treasury resources. The next phase of that will be how we make hard fork decisions. But so that will be a 2019 project.
That's like a part 2 in 2019. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a much harder problem to solve. But even the resource allocation thing is critical because so the way that I view it is even the 50-person team that we have currently, we're not going to be, you can dislodge us through the voting system. We're trying to basically structure the system so that we as a team have to bid on contracts to the community, and the community can decide whether they like us or another team. Or maybe they want us to do some things and another team to do other things, and that's great too. So this is the path to decentralization.
Well, it seems as if that's a strong path, and it seems as if you're actually thinking about a lot of these issues, a lot of these problems, and most importantly, that you and your team are really coming up with a lot of solutions to push this forward. It's going to be really interesting to see how this new code that you guys release gets received. And personally, we're really excited to see the continued development coming from Zen and from the entire team, the different teams involved, not just at Zen, but with IOHK as well. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you want to say in conclusion, wrapping up this interview?
Yeah, we have some really cool products coming out in the near future as well, so stay tuned to that. We're really trying to pivot hard ultimately to be a product-oriented project. I mean, the infrastructure R&D that we're doing is awesome, and I really applaud our team for doing these kind of engineering upgrades to just Bitcoin protocol that I think will benefit the entire industry. But I think ultimately what we want to do is we want to build just killer products that users love and use every day and don't even realize run on a blockchain. So that's where we're ultimately going, and that's kind of a really big push for us now, despite all of our talk and all of our discussion being on the R&D and these engineering upgrades to our core protocol. We still have a very vibrant product and business development team that's just pushing forward hard in that other direction.
Well, that's going to be even more exciting as we're able to take those products and introduce that to all these audiences that just want cooler things in the world, that give them more freedom, more control, more sovereignty in the world without having to understand that something uses, internet technology or blockchain technology or whatever the technology is, just making things useful, practical, and easy to use, in addition to being secure, of course. Rob Viglione, I want to thank you very much for your time here in the Minting Coins Show, and until next time, really looking forward to see what it is that you guys put out next.
Thank you very much, Gary. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So that was my interview with Rob Viglione at ZenCash. Let me know, what do you think? What do you think about the 51% attack that happened to Zen? What do you think about the misconceptions that maybe people have about what happened? We're minting coins over here as a part of the Minting Coins Show, but with what happened in the 51% attack, there were no new coins, no new Zen coins that were minted. It was just a fraudulent activity. And it seems as if they have some incredible technology that's going to seriously prevent that from happening again. So let me know, did this answer any of your questions? Did this make more questions for you about Zen? Let me know in the comments below. Like this video. If you haven't liked this video, it really helps support us and helps other people find this content. And subscribe, hit that bell icon. And if you have any questions, let us know soon. Until next time, I'm glad that together we are minting coins.